Hi. Um, Trying to figure out how to turn on my computer. Okay. Hi. Hi. Good morning, everyone. So I'm just gonna sip on some of my coffee here for a second while I wait for a few folks to join. Happy quarantine Saturday to everyone. I this morning chose my largest cup for coffee because I needed the extra boost. Um, and all right, I'm gonna see if I can find Giles here. Once again, there we go. Oh, there he is. So, um, hi Giles.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me for brunch.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I actually didn't
Really?
bring any food or.
Well, that's the funny thing. You actually made my brunch.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
You're welcome. What?
You recognize this?
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah, that looks, by the way, incredibly appetizing when you hold it up in the jar like that. What Giles is holding up is some jarred smoked sockeye salmon that we smoked in Alaska this last summer. How is it? How
It's
rancid
good.
is it?
It's good. And I've got some nice pickles with it, some sourdough toast. So yeah,
Great.
you actually made me my brunch.
Well, that's really, I can't believe that you have waited this long to eat it. And the good news is that botulism usually takes at least a day to set in, so you should be fine for the rest of this.
Yeah, I should make it through this whole conversation.
um, so, so Giles is in London, and I am in Washington State, and we had been texting a little while back. I think I was complaining to Giles about how I have to do more dishes now than ever before. And he said, I understand your pain. I know exactly what that kind of sacrifice is like because I lost two legs and an arm and had a tracheotomy and was unable to communicate with anyone for a while. So I know exactly what you're going through, MIsha. And and that level of empathy and understanding was really inspiring. Um, I I'm going to give you I think like a sort of traditional little preamble introduction thing, and then maybe we can get into talking about your story. Um, but I've known Giles for several years. We actually only met in person a couple of summers ago for
Yep.
the first time at our mutual friend Philip and Hillary's wedding, where we sat at a table and talked for I think 12 hours straight and had some really good laughs, invented some really important things like soup face, which because of our mutual NDA, I'm not allowed to disclose the details of it. Um, but Giles and I have also been working on projects together for the last several years. Giles has been identifying, he travels the world as a conflict photographer. How do you, what is the job title that you use to describe yourself?
I would say the humanitarian photographer. So,
Okay.
trying to document the lesser known stories of communities and individuals caught up in conflict.
So you're basically traveling the world, going to the worst, most dire situations out there and documenting some of the people who are going through the most hardship in the world
Yeah.
and getting to know these people and getting to learn what it is that they really need most and what can be most helpful. And then we collaborate at least once a year on doing a project between Gish and Random Acts and the people that you have worked with in far-flung corners of the world. We have worked with a dance school in a township in South Africa, and we've worked with Rwandan genocide survivors to purchase farmland for them, and with Syrian refugees in Lebanon, and uh, and all of these experiences have been really gratifying for me, and I think for you too. But as we've gone as we work together on these projects, I've noticed most of the time you want to talk about these people that we're helping. We've done these little video chats
Yeah.
before, and you've always wanted to talk about, you know, these people that we're helping, and not so much about yourself and your story. And going into this quarantine and this shelter in place and this sort of global crisis that we're experiencing, I think that you sort of realized that you might have some things to share about your experience dealing with an isolation of a sort that is at a level that most of us can't even fathom, and how you actually learned a lot of things from your experiences and might be willing to convey some of that, and some of it might actually be useful. I mean, maybe we'll see. But so yeah, so maybe if if it sounds good to you, I don't know if you have another idea for format, but if you could maybe a little bit tell sort of your origin story. You know, you were working as a photographer, you know, documenting musicians, and then you transitioned to doing more political photography, right? You
Yeah.
froze
So I mean,
for a second.
Okay, so did you.
Yeah, great. Okay.
So a brief kind of resume of my life. I used to be a fashion photographer. At 18, I got given a camera, and it was like I got given my voice. I'm dyslexic. I was always told I was stupid at school. I had a really tough time. And suddenly when I got given this camera, it's like I could suddenly talk with the world. And I started out photographing bands, musicians, kind of a rock and roll photographer. And I did that for 10 years, and it was great. I loved it. But I always wanted to do something more with the work that I did. So I gave up the fashion photography and then started to work in the humanitarian sector, working for charities, trying to tell these stories that we don't hear so much about. And really, you know, what I wanted to do was try and make sure that these people's voices were heard. You know, there are people, marginalized people all around the world, also in communities that don't have the opportunity, can't reach media. And I could kind of be a bridge between their stories and the people that needed to hear them.
And then in 2011, you want to tell us what happened?
Yeah, I had a really bad day at work. I was working in Afghanistan. I was documenting the impact of the war on civilians there, and I stepped on a landmine, an IED. I immediately lost both my legs and my left arm, and really, it was a miracle I didn't die. I thought these were going to be the last moments of my life. I didn't lose my consciousness. Somehow I managed to keep alive. I was taken to Medivac, to a hospital there, where they stabilized me and then flew me back to the United Kingdom, back to London. And it really was then that I go into this period that we were sort of discussing, which is isolation, an extreme form of isolation. When I was injured, as I lost both my legs and my arm, I was then in an intensive care unit for 46 days. Now, I had a tube that was into my throat here. I had another tube that was feeding me, so I couldn't speak. My one remaining hand was broken, so it was in a cast. So it was strapped to my side, and I was quite literally strapped to the bed. I couldn't even go to the toilet myself. That was all done manually. So I couldn't eat, go to the toilet. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The only way I could communicate with the world was by blinking. I was trapped in my own mind. It is the ultimate extreme version of isolation, really. Now, the way I describe it, I suppose at first, was like being thrown in the sea when it's freezing cold. You get thrown in the sea and you gasp. Mm-hmm. I was inside my own mind, gasping like that. I was panicking. I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to live, what was going on around me. In intensive care, the lights never go off. There's constant noise. You have no idea of the time, what day it is. And I was just sort of trapped in this situation. And after a little while, I started to realize that, you know, I couldn't communicate with anyone. I couldn't let people know how I was feeling. The doctors and nurses were amazing, but I had no way of interacting with them. And I knew this was suddenly going to be a long haul. This was not going to be over in a few hours, but I was going to be there for a long time. And I would have to find a way to deal with it, a way to manage it. So I decided I had to kind of create my own world in my mind. And that's the amazing thing. It doesn't matter how isolated we are. It doesn't matter how locked down we are. Nobody can ever control our mind and our imagination. So I said to myself, okay, I need to create a world. I need to create some kind of place of sanctuary in my own mind where I can exist, where I can live within the boundaries of my own sort of mind, and set up a world there. So one of the things I did was what I call 100 portraits before I die. And I had this thought of all these people I wished I'd photographed in the past. And I thought, I wished I'd asked those people, I wished I'd done those portraits. And so I set myself this little project of imagining each one of those photo shoots. Now, as I said, there was no clock, there was no time, so I have no idea how long things were going on. But what I did know is that every so often the nurses would come, and it was a regular interview. They would come and they would take my blood pressure readings and all my bloods. So that was my unit of time. I didn't know how long that period was, but I knew it was regular.
Wow.
That's how I marked the days. So I would then set myself, and I wouldn't just imagine doing a photo shoot. I wouldn't think, oh, I'm just going to photograph so-and-so, and that's it. No, I would visualize it. So I would imagine the moment I met that person, shook their hand and said hello. The first things I would say to them, I would imagine the lighting that I'd set up in the studio or on location. I would imagine doing the photographs, the camera that I was using, what camera would I use? I would then imagine how the photographs would go. I would then see myself printing those images at the end and the final product. I went through every single detail. Wow. And I did that for all 100 people. And that was how I kept myself kind of sane when all this craziness was going on around me. And you know what's really interesting? I mean, I spent a whole year in hospital, 46 days where I couldn't communicate, another year in hospital, another year recovering where I was in a little bedsit with no kind of interaction with the outside world. I came out of that a better photographer than I started. Even though I didn't take a single photograph in that period, I'm now a better photographer. Everything I do, all my creativity, what I'm able to capture now in my photographs is because of that time when I was trapped in my mind going through those photographs. Because I would do it. I would take a photograph, one portrait, and the next one, I imagined, when the unit of time came, when the nurses came to check and I knew it was the next unit of time, I would think, what did I do wrong the last time? How can I improve that? What can I do differently? I would change the cameras that I was using. I started shooting back on film. I used to shoot digitally. I went back to shooting on film. I moved back to black and white. I started lighting differently. And that's the work that I do now. So there's a difference between the work just before I got injured and the work that I do now. And that all developed in my mind. Now, I know that's an extreme version of isolation. And this is not about comparing one person's experience to another. Each one of us is going through our own challenges. But what I want to say is that it doesn't matter how extreme it gets. Something positive can still come out of it.
Mm-hmm. How, can I ask, how many of those 100 people have you photographed since coming out?
A few of them. It was again, one of the things that I thought about afterwards or at the time was, this was something I wanted to do in my life, these people I wanted to photograph. And I was like lying in this bubble. I was thinking to myself, why did I never bother to ask them? Why did I never call them? Why did I never try? Because again, we put off so many things in life, so many things that we think, oh, I better not bother that person, or they'll probably say no, or I probably don't stand a chance with that. One of the things I learned during that period when I thought I was going to die is the only thing I regretted was the things I hadn't done. I regretted not having called those people. I regretted not making that opportunity. So yeah, when I came out of hospital, I did get in contact, and I started meeting a few of them and photographing a few of them. But then, unfortunately, I went back to work full time, so I was traveling, so I wasn't able to carry on that project. But it is something that cannot be taken away. You could not imagine what it's like. I mean, go and lie down for 1 hour. In that hour, do not move a millimeter. Stare at the same bit of ceiling. Do not speak. Nobody can speak to you. Now imagine that for over 1,000 hours, which is what I did. But wow. It was actually an amazing time when I discovered so much about myself. One of the things I get asked a lot at the moment is people came to me because, they know my experience, what I went through. And I've had a lot of friends ask me, how can I be more resilient? Mm-hmm. A lot of people are really struggling with what's going on. And I totally understand those struggles. And people say to me, how can I be more resilient? And the answer is, I don't think you can make yourself resilient. Resilience is the gift that we're given when we suffer. So I photograph people and people that we've helped together, like Khulud, Olive, Aya. Those are families and individuals that have suffered terribly, but they've come out of that with huge resilience. And for me, it was the same. I don't see myself as a particularly resilient person. I went through a terrible time. Life gave me a gift at the end of it. And that was resilience, which means I could deal with issues a lot better now. So everybody right now is going through a hard time. Everybody is suffering to a certain extent. and some people more than others. But all of us at the end of this will have more resilience. So you can't create resilience, but know that at the end of this, you're going to be dealing with a lot of other issues in your life in a lot better way. A lot of things that challenged you before this happened will seem less challenging after this. So remember that what you're going through right now is actually strengthening you. It's going to make life better for you when this is over. You will be a stronger, more resilient person.
When you described, so I guess one of the things that happens to people in COVID-19 is that their lungs, in dire cases, their lungs start filling with fluid, and people that we're seeing the photos of in the news who are on ventilators are actually experiencing something akin to drowning with their lungs filled with fluid, which is something that you experienced when you were recovering. And I imagine, I mean, you speak of suffering, that must have been an intense form of suffering. But I imagine it also, when you're unable to move, you're unable to speak, and you feel like you're drowning, you must be overwhelmed. I'm projecting here, but I imagine you're overwhelmed with a sense of panic. Like, that's got to be a terrifying feeling as well. And I know I've spoken with a lot of people who are experiencing anxiety, very heightened anxiety at this time, and panic, and unsure of the outcome of their lives right now. Were there any particular tools during this process that you discovered or deployed to cope with those specific feelings of panic or anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, I it's hard for me at the moment with everything that's going on, because of that experience of having been on a ventilator. I know exactly what is happening to the people in hospitals around the world right now, and that kind of connection and empathy of realizing what they're going through. But I'll be honest as well, it creates a fear in me. I've been there. I know what that's like. I have very vulnerable lungs now because of what I went through. If I get sick, it would be very difficult for me. So I have anxiety, and I understand everybody feeling that way. When I got actually blown up, the moment I got blown up, landed on my side. I could see my legs had gone and my arm was gone, and I probably didn't think I had long to go. And I was in a panic and anxious, as you would be. And something clicked in my mind, and I remember thinking, don't think about things you can't control. Do not think about those things, but think about the one thing you can control. At that moment, the only thing I left that I could control was my breathing. Literally everything else was outside. So you've got people running around, people screaming, stuff going on. There were gunshots going off, helicopters flying. It's chaos. But I just went into this very calm place where I said, think about your breathing. And I have this exercise where I imagine a room, and the room is full of mist or fog, and you can hardly see anything in that room. And then as you breathe in, you kind of see that fog and that mist, and it's going into your lungs, and you feel it filling your lungs, and the room becomes clear. And then you exhale again. And it's a very simple exercise. And at the worst moments, that's always the exercise that I would go to in the very, very panicky moments. But in a more general way, as I say, I just realized that I would not deal if I was constantly worrying about all these things outside of my control. I didn't know how long I was going to be in hospital. I didn't know what operations the doctors were going to do. I didn't know what procedures they were going to do next to try and keep me alive. But I couldn't think about it because it would overwhelm me. It's the same right now. There is so much going on that's outside of our control. But if we focus all the time on how many people are dying, where it's spreading, how long is this going to last, how long are we going to be locked down, the anxiety will overwhelm you. Mm-hmm. You have to focus on your own space. We're all locked down in different ways. I'm locked down in a flat. I'm lucky I have a lovely flat, but I can control this space. And what I'm doing in that space is making it my home, my safe place, my sort of own environment. I control this in the same way that when I was locked down completely, I controlled what was going on here. So what I would suggest to people is try to not focus too much. I know it's not easy. I'm not saying this is something you can just do overnight. These were exercises that I had to keep repeating and repeating. But try not to think about the things you can't control. Think about the things you can control. You can control what time you get up in the morning. You can control if you're having something to eat. You control, what you do during the day. But don't spend your whole time like watching the news, checking social media, thinking about all these things. Because no matter how much you get anxious about it, no matter how nervous you get about it, you won't affect what's happening. So think about your own space. But I would also say one other thing. There's a lot going on. We're talking now about resilience and creating things and doing things. And I know there's a lot of of people sort of talking about, I'm always posting pictures myself of the stuff I've cooked and what I'm doing. But don't put so much pressure on yourself as well. It's okay to have days when something like this is going on, where you do feel overwhelmed, where you do feel upset. People kind of see the side that's projected of my recovery, and wow, you were so resilient and strong. But I'm like, no, there were days when I was so overwhelmed, I would just be in tears. And it was my sister that first said it to me. She said, it's okay to feel like that some days. It's okay to have moments where you just go, I can't deal with this. It's too much. And allow that to happen. But by you choosing that, by you saying, I'm going to allow myself to have that day, it means you're still in control of that. So rather than overwhelming you, it's like you've given yourself a day off to feel a bit sad, to maybe stay in bed, to cry. But it keeps that element of control.
I have a visitor here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that also sounds like an element of mourning of the loss that you're going through. If you are, constantly pushing everything away, that smacks of denial, right? Like you lost some really important things, and you lost some important appendages, and you lost a couple of years. And if you're not able to mourn that and acknowledge that, it's denial, right? I mean, that's got to be a big part of the process. And there are a lot of people right now who are losing loved ones, who have lost loved ones, who are afraid of losing loved ones, who have lost jobs, who have lost, social connection, and not be able to mourn that is to not acknowledge what's happening, right?
And I think also I'm speaking again to friends, and there's this sort of sense of, yes, some people are losing loved ones. My personal experience, I lost my legs, my arms. So if somebody has lost something, maybe it was like they were going to go on a really special holiday with their family, and that's not happening. But then they kind of feel like, well, that seems a little bit, unimportant to moan about that when people are dying or sick. That doesn't matter. Each one of us has our own level of grief, our own experiences that have hurt us. And sometimes it can be really, small little things that really upset us. And it was the same for me. It's like, yeah, I lost my legs, my arm, all these big tragedies, but sometimes it'd be some really small little thing that would upset me. So allow yourself, don't compare yourself and think, oh, these people have had it worse than I have, or this person's got it worse. No, it's okay, whatever it is that's upsetting you, to upset you, and go with it. But control it. And
you mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. We were chatting, and you said, yeah, yes, I've gone through these major losses, but right now I'm really upset about the fact that they canceled my appearance at the UN. Which in the scheme of things sounds like not a big deal. But of course, the things that are affecting our lives are important to us as humans, and we have to allow for that. I think a lot of times, it could be really easy for people hearing this to start applying that filter of, what do I have to complain about? Which is not at all the point of what you're talking about.
No. Absolutely not the point. And it's, not just now, but generally, I'll have friends and we'll be talking about something, and they'll stop and they'll say, oh, that sounds really trivial compared to what you've been through. And that's not what this is about. Everybody has had their worst experience and their best experience, and that is what we measure our lives in. Yeah. And I still get upset by very trivial things that just hurt me for different reasons. Sometimes the bigger things are actually easier to deal with because we go into a different mode, and our brains sort of fire off in a different way. So, allow yourself grief for whatever it is you've lost. And even if that thing is simply, like my nephews, they weren't able to finish school because they didn't have that final day of saying goodbye to all their friends. And, that's something that there's grief and a sadness they've lost. Other friends, have got businesses that are struggling. Other people have got, just the simple fact of just being isolated and not seeing people. We're all going through grief, and it's fine to feel that way.
I don't know if you can see this, but I have like a little, see that at the end of my finger? It's just from excessive hand washing. It's getting very dry. And that is very difficult.
Of course, there is a limit to my sympathy for other suffering. My big thing at the moment, actually, my personal suffering is an awkwardness that I feel, because I don't know if it's happening there in the States, but here at 8 o'clock every Thursday night, people clap, or the healthcare service. Obviously, in my flat, there's an awkward silence.
Right.
Because on one hand man clapping, So, well, the whole world
You could
collapsed.
just slap your face.
Yeah, I'm like, everybody's just rubbing it in that I can't clap anymore. You know, and again, that's another thing I would say. You know, if the places I work, you know, some of the worst humanitarian crises, you know, I meet people in conflict zones and in all sorts of disasters, is humor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people have the darkest sense of humor in the worst places. I have laughed so much, sat in Mosul in the middle of the fighting with an old Iraqi grandmother who has just had this great sense of humor. And again, I think people can get caught up or feel this sort of sense of we have to be so, because it's a very serious thing going on, which it is, that we can't allow ourselves just to have fun or joke or laugh. That's hugely, hugely important. You know, I have a very dark sense of humor. That helped me so much through my recovery, to be able to joke about my own experience, to joke about what I was going through, and still to this day, be able to make humor about it. So, you know, allow yourself as well to be having, because I think people can almost feel like I shouldn't be having fun when somebody outside is suffering, or when this terrible thing's happening in my city. I shouldn't be making a joke or laughing, but people
Mm-hmm.
do. And that's okay as well. You know, it's a really important defense mechanism.
Yeah. That's a good point. Um, we're we're laughing a little bit, right, Mason? Right? What are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to tell me?
Where is the
Where's a flashlight? Downstairs in the kitchen in the drawer. You'll find a flashlight. I'm not sure what you need it for, but it sounds important. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful. So I wanted to go back to something that you were talking about earlier. You um, you mentioned something that it's like the serenity prayer. You know, don't think about the things that you can't control, and focus on the things that you can control. Which is so much easier said than done. I think a lot of times when I hear that, a little part of me thinks, fuck you. Like, it's impossible to not think about the things
Okay.
that you know what I mean?
So
And
let me
so,
tell you.
like,
Let me tell you about the time.
specifically, how do you
It's like if you can't control your laptop.
right, then how can you control the
You can't control your
circular
laptop. How can
thoughts
you
in your
control
head?
life? So 3 months after I got injured, emotionally and psychologically was the worst moment of my life. It was 3 months after. For the first couple of months, I was fighting to keep alive, you know, with the things we were just discussing. So in a way, that's relatively easy because you don't think about much else. You're just like, I've got to get through the day. I've got to get through the hour. I've got to get through the minute. 3 months after, I was moved to a high dependency unit, a special ward, which meant I was a little bit better. I was off kind of life support. But that's actually when things got really tough, because that's when I had to come to terms with a new reality. That I'd lost my legs, my arm. I was told I'd probably never walk again, that I would never live independently, and that was no question of me ever working again. Everything I valued had been taken away from me. And 3 months, pretty much the day of when I got injured, was the first time I had enough strength to even be transferred from my bed into a wheelchair and taken to have a shower.
Mm-hmm.
They took me into the shower and I saw myself in a mirror for the first time. And I was repulsed. I was disgusted by what I saw. Missing these legs, this arm. I thought I was ugly. I was hideous. It was so upsetting for me. It was like everything suddenly smacked me in the face of this new reality. And they took me back to the bed, put me back in the bed. It would take 4 people to lift me. I felt so useless and powerless. They put me back in the bed and I cried myself to sleep that night. And I was really lost. And I remember thinking, I wished I had just died in Afghanistan. I wished I hadn't survived. Even though I've been fighting for 3 months to survive, it suddenly dawned on me what my new life was. And I didn't want to be this person that looked like this. I didn't want to be this person that couldn't look after themselves, that couldn't just go out for a walk or go for a run. And worst of all, I couldn't be this person that couldn't work again and do what I love. And I cried myself to sleep that night. But the next day, I woke up and it was like something had clicked in my mind. Something had changed. I'm notoriously stubborn, and that stubbornness had come back. And when I woke up the next morning, I said to myself, from this moment on, I will never think about the things I can't do, but I will think about what I still can, and I will excel at those things. And that's what I've done since that point. I decided I was going to become a better photographer, a better man. I was going to be a better person in my community. I was going to do more for other people. I was going to focus on these things. Now, of course, you know, it's not 100% thing. There's sometimes when something happens, or I have, again, like I said, we're allowed these days, bad days. And on those bad days, I'll cry and I think, oh, I wish I could just go for a run. Or I wish I could just go and jump in the sea. I wish I could go and just dance and not think about falling over or worry about all these things. I wish I had a day and I wasn't in pain, whatever it is. But those are only odd moments. Because what I realized is that I had so much to live for, so much to enjoy. And again, we talk about gifts coming from these experiences. The gift I was given was to appreciate everything in life 100 times more. You know, I will stand out in the rain and it'd be, you know, bad day and gray, and I'll be like, I can experience this, I can feel it. So of course, I'm not saying it's easy just to say, oh, let's just focus on the things we can do and not worry about everything else. But you can do it. It is possible. You know, I did it in that extreme version. And it's like right now, you know, I had various projects planned. I had 2 exhibitions, one in New York, one in Italy. You know, all those things have come to an end and finished. You know, for me personally as well, you know, I'm not working, I'm not able to do a lot of those things. But there's so much I can do. Like, I'm really enjoying cooking again because I have the time to do that. So I'm focusing on those things. And I'm focusing on, you know, trying to be a different person when this is over. And again, this is sort of what it comes down to, is we can't control what's going on. This is what it keeps coming back to. We can't control all that stuff on the outside. We can't control how long we're locked down for. But we can control who we will be when this finishes. And I know that the last time I went through something like this, I came out a better person because I grew so much and I learned so much about myself. You know, I used to suffer from terrible, terrible depression, really bad mental health issues. And a lot of what I went through helped me to deal with those things. And we'll go through another experience. And right now I'm thinking, who do I want to be at the end of this? What are the things that I can work on? What are the things maybe I can learn, a new skill or a new, whatever it is. But I'm determined that, again, when I come out of this, I will be in some ways a better person than I was when I started.
You mentioned that you were doing a visualization of this mist. Is that something of a meditation that you had practiced? You must have practiced that before, or did that just come to you? And
It was,
are there other practical, you have an intrusive thought, you know, something comes in that is out of your control, that you could spin out on. In very practical terms, are there techniques that you deploy to redirect that thought energy?
Okay, so you know, the great kind of Buddhist idea of the misty room and the breath coming in, you know, on a mountaintop and all the rest of it. I'd like to tell you about how I studied Zen Buddhism as a child, and in a monastery in Tibet. But actually, it's just watching loads of Kung Fu films when I was a kid. And I remember it was in one of these Kung Fu films that I really loved. I think it was a Jackie Chan film. But it was just something that I remember just stuck in my mind for some reason. And then when I was stuck in hospital, it came back to me. So that was just a personal thing. Everything I'm saying, I know I'm making it sound like, oh, it's just you make these decisions, you do this, you control this. I'm trying to sort of say, you know, from 2 years of going through this, the things that I learned. But it's not to say that there were times when it was difficult, when an intrusive thought would come in, when I didn't have that strength, when I didn't have that focus. And so, you know, I'm not at all saying to everyone, because I'm sure there's people listening to this going like, well, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can control those thoughts. And I'm not saying it's easy. It's something about practice. It's like everything we do. If we practice, we get better at it. So, you know, at the beginning, you know, I was talking about doing that visualization where I'd imagine doing a photo shoot and do the rest of it. The first few days, first few weeks of that, I would maybe have 2 minutes of thinking something, and then I'd see some nurse with a big needle or whatever, and I'd panic. I'd be, what's happening? What's going on? I'd hear a beeper going off on the support systems, and I would lose my train of thought. But I would do it every day and keep focusing on it. And what I would say is that, again, when we're going down in lockdown and isolation, I know a lot of people are struggling with their mental health. You know, a lot of people who have mental health issues, struggle with things, are finding it even harder in this circumstance. And that is absolutely understandable. But what I'm saying is try and find little ways to exercise every day. In the same way an athlete could go. It's just allow yourself maybe half an hour a day to visualize some of the things you want to do when this is over. You know, visualize the friends you want to see. Think about, like I've been cooking meals And I hate being on my own because I love cooking for other people. I'm stuck on my own. But what I do is each meal I make at the moment, I'm making it for somebody else in my mind. So it's like I have a friend who's a nurse. She's in Italy, right in the middle of the worst situation. And I've worked with her in Iraq and Afghanistan. She's having a really tough time. And the other day, she sort of sent me a joking message saying it was driving her crazy seeing all my food posts and all the rest of it. So I was like, oh, what's the one meal you're craving? And it's this particular type of pasta from Piedmont. So that's what I'm going to try and make next week. And I'll make it for her. And I imagine doing that. So it's like these little fun exercises as well we can do just to create things. So rather than sit now and have a meal on my own, I'm having a meal with my friend in my imagination. And sometimes I'm calling them and telling them what I've cooked for them.
That's lovely. How much of your time would you say you spend visualizing the time that you'll spend with me in the future?
There we go. I've done that. That's
yeah.
That
So there's another thing that I've noticed about you, which is, and I'm sure that this has plays a major role in your resilience. But you spend a lot of your time and waking life trying to help other people, trying to tell the stories of people who are most affected by conflict, people who are in really dire humanitarian situations. You travel the world, documenting their stories and getting them out there. And I know for myself that when I act compassionately and take a brief reprieve from my selfish MO to do something for someone else, it definitely affects my well-being. How much of that in your life has been a conscious choice, and how much is it just where you have found yourself, if that makes sense?
So, in my late 20s, when I gave up the fashion stuff, I was in a really bad state with my mental health. I was very, very depressed, to the point that the depression would make it that I almost couldn't function in normal life. And I ended up I moved out of London. I got a job in a pub. I was pretty much drinking myself to death as well. I was in a very, very bad state. And I reached a point where I actually thought I didn't want to go on with life, and pretty much reached rock bottom. And something at that moment kicked in again in the subconscious, and I got a job as a care worker, as a support worker for somebody with very severe autism. And it was a weird thing to do. I had no connection with that world. I'd never done anything like that before. And something inside me made me do that. I'd spent 10 years hanging out with fashion models, with rock stars and the rest of it. And suddenly I was doing a job where I was doing one-to-one support with someone who, needed sort of, constant attention and help doing basic things like making tea or anything. And I can honestly say it was the first time in my life I felt happy. And a lot of people couldn't understand it. I'd gone from having this amazing life of hanging out with movie stars and getting paid a stupid amount of money, traveling the world. And here I was doing a job where quite literally you have to wipe somebody's ass, and people say like, what's happened? And I could say for the first time in my life, I could see the direct and positive impact I had on somebody else's. And it gave me a purpose, and it made my life feel worthwhile when in my own mind, I didn't see any worth in myself, and I always saw myself as worthless. But because I was doing something for someone else, I felt finally like I had some kind of purpose and worth. And so really that's the beginning of everything I do now and everything I continue to do now. I am a lot better, much, much better than I was in terms of my depression. But the thing that really does keep me going all the time is the desire to help others, to make the impact on other people's lives. So even on the times when I don't really like myself or I'm having problems with that, I can see some glimmer of hope in the fact that I'm able to do things for others. And it's one of the things that's happening now. And, with this crisis, I think, again, getting back to what we've been talking about, not having any element of control of what's happening can be very challenging. We feel like all this is going on, this chaos, and we're just sort of sat at home doing nothing. So I've just been doing small little things to try and help the community. I'm isolated at home. I'm stuck here. But I've managed to set up a little taxi service for some of the nurses and doctors. So we have volunteer drivers. I get phone calls now from I'm like the taxi receptionist. So I get calls at 4 a.m. going, can I book a taxi from the hospital to my home? And I'm like, yeah, love, be with you in 10 minutes and all that. And I get volunteer. But that's helped me to deal with what's going on. because I feel in some small way, I mean, I can't, I'm not a doctor, I can't be helping in a really serious way, but maybe I can just make the life a little bit more comfortable for those people who are doing that. And so, that for me is definitely how I deal with a lot of issues in the world, and definitely how I deal with my own mental health issues, is the times when I'm not getting on with myself, I focus on trying to help others.
Mm-hmm. That's been one of the frustrating things about this particular moment, is that feeling of having a difficult time figuring out how to help, because the thing that we're supposed to, the main thing that we're all supposed to be doing to help is stay at home and stay away from other people, which really doesn't feel like a major contribution. So I think everybody is sort of looking for little things that they can do, and not everyone can set up a remote text
No,
service in their
but
living room.
but I
But
think everything we can do, and again, that's one of the reasons why we get a lot of anxiety and stress, is because we feel like we have no control over the situation. It's like, for me, I'm a photographer that's in conflict zones, in really stressful places. I'm always in the action. And now, again, same, like now I have to sit home quietly when there's things happening all around me. I feel completely powerless from that. But it's the very small things that we can do that have a little impact. Like we have in the building where I live, there's an elderly lady who lives on the top floor. She's in her 80s. She's got a bad hip. It's very easy just to reach out to her and say, is there anything we can get you? Some shopping. I can speak to the other neighbors. We can make sure that you've always got the things you need. It's a very small gesture, but in some ways it helps. What I didn't expect is her to then ask for 6 liters of sherry.
That's a lot of sherry.
I know. I mean, that's genuinely what she asked for. And I was like, okay, I didn't expect that. I was going to kind of get, I thought she's a little old lady. She's going to want 6 liters of sherry.
She knows how she's going to cope with this.
Exactly.
She's figured it out.
She's from the generation that went through World War II. She knows what she's doing. She's been here before. So I'm taking her advice.
Well, I'm going to see, there's people posting little comments and questions. I'm going to see if I can, does anybody have any questions for Giles here as they scroll past? There's some coming through in Russian. How is your Cyrillic? Yeah.
We bought the sherry for it, and then we had it delivered.
Good. Good. Yeah. There was a question about the sherry in case you missed it.
Yeah, we're doing a public service.
Well, if you see a question that scrolls across there, respond to it. I'm gonna just pull up something that you wrote, which I thought was lovely. You texted this to me a little while ago, like 2 weeks ago. In 2011, whilst in intensive care, my remaining hand was in a plaster cast. A tracheotomy meant I couldn't speak. My only connection with the world was through blinking. It's hard to think of how you could be more isolated from life. I couldn't move, communicate, eat, drink, even going to the toilet for myself. My body was a prison. The only place I could roam was within my head. It was difficult at first, but I soon learned that nothing could confine my imagination, my hopes, my dreams. Once I stopped fighting my perimeters, I found a new freedom. I would study, I would exercise, I would plan, I would take photographs, I would love, all within my mind. Speaking to friends today, I know how hard this is mentally for many. It's so hard to isolate yourself, to feel your freedoms curtailed. But trust me, it gets better. It really does. You will discover strengths and resilience you never knew you had. Many of us are going through this alone, but we are doing it together. Even in darkness, you can find beauty. You just need time to let your eyes adjust. This is very beautiful and very helpful to hear. Yeah.
I'm going to cry now just hearing that.
Yeah, it's really lovely. It's really such an important reminder.
And I think maybe that's the thing that, and why I wanted to do this today is, I maybe had a little head start on people, and I went through something difficult. And I know a lot of other people are going through something difficult. And, to be a few steps ahead, to be a guide, and to say and remind people it gets better, we get through it, and things will be different on the other side, and many things will even be better.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your insights on this. It's been Really nice talking to you.
No, it's been really, really, really good. So I've talked too
Yeah,
much, so I haven't actually been able to eat any of my brunch.
that's all right. It's probably a poison anyway, so it's probably for the best. Um, those of you who don't know, Giles has a really great Instagram feed, the One Arm Chef, where you take photos of the beautiful food that you make. It's food porn, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and it looks delicious what you're making. Um, it actually it makes it for me it makes it a little bit harder to go through quarantine because I just like I want that food and I can't have it and it's just so actually don't follow him. Don't follow the One Arm Chef. It's not good. Um, and yeah, and I wanted to plug something too. We're doing a mini Gish scavenger hunt quarantine edition. So it's a 1 day Gish scavenger hunt that people can do from home. So if you're watching this and you haven't signed up, you should because we. I don't know if we're really. I don't know what we should talk if there's any kind of collaboration that we can do on this little mini Gish. But in the past, Giles and I have collaborated for many years on Gish items that have been so gratifying and so awesome. Like for example, you also sent this video of Aya, which I'm going to show you. I just got to
yep.
make sure that I've taken all of the pornography off my desktop before I play this. Okay, there we go. Can you see what I'm pointing my camera at? Is that showing up? Yes.
Yep.
So this is Aya. And she's making cookies. I don't know what those little brown balls are. I think it's chocolate that goes inside the cookie. Yeah. She is do you want to just tell her story because it's so lovely and
I mean again this is a really interesting story. I mean Aya, I met her 7-8 years ago. She's a Syrian refugee living in Lebanon. She has spina bifida, living in this tent, muddy and wet, with her mother and her sisters and brother. And really, her situation was desperate. She wasn't getting any medical support. You know, most people thought she wouldn't really live for much longer. But what I discovered when I met her was not a victim. I discovered the feistiest 4-year-old I'd ever met in my life. She was this firebrand from the moment. And I remember one of the first things we did, we were doing this interview, and at the end of it, you know, she wasn't really speaking, but then she just goes, "Aya will never die." And it's just like she's this incredible force of nature. So, you know, we were able in partnership, you know, with Randoms Acts and Gish to be able to crowdfund for her and some other families, and sort of really protect her at that time and then help in the relocation to France where she now lives. And she's flourishing there and she's doing these incredible things. The whole family's doing really well. The community in France, in the small little town, have really grown to love her, as everybody does that meets her. I mean, everybody that meets her absolutely falls in love with Aya. I did her story 7 years ago and I still get people stopping in the street going, "How's Aya doing? What's happening with Aya?" She's this incredible character. I mean, I remember when I first met her, she was like in the floor in this tent, and oh, poor girl, you know. And then her sister walked in, and she just looked at her sister, and she's like, "Hey, donkey, pick me up." And she got picked up and taken out, and then we'd walk around the refugee camp, and I discovered that Aya didn't just run her family; she ran this whole camp. And she'd be like, somebody was bread, and she'd be like, "Hey, donkey, give me the bread." And, "Hey, donkey, give me the water." And everybody did what Aya commanded.
I'm going to
But
start calling my family members donkey. I think that's a very effective tool.
But you know, the really beautiful thing and very, very timely for what's happening. You know, one of the really interesting things that's happening right now with this whole lockdown is in many ways, we are all trying to work together to protect some of the most vulnerable in our communities. And I remember talking to Aya's parents. This was before they got relocated. And even in that terrible situation, to a certain extent, their situation was made more challenging because of Aya. You know, they couldn't travel so easily. They couldn't do certain things. But they always referred to her as their blessing. And they said Aya, in their darkest time, was what kept their family together. And so even when they lived in this tent, in the mud and the wet and the rain, they always referred to Aya as their blessing. And then the great irony, or not irony, but the amazing thing, was that because of Aya's condition, the whole family was relocated to France. And so years later, it turned out, and they were able to say, actually, it was Aya that saved the whole family.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that's a wonderful thing. And they were just an incredible
Right, and
team.
it's probably true. I mean, you also picked up on her particular story because it was so compelling,
Yeah,
and then we were, you know, able to garner resources because her story was so compelling and because she was such a light.
exactly.
And not only and her story also helped us raise enough funds to help
Many,
several other families as well, so that this one child actually was the seed for,
yes, exactly.
you know,
Like
recovery for a lot of people.
there's an amazing girl called Huala. And Huala is, again, a story about, you know, mental health issues. And at 12 years old, she was living as a refugee from Syria in Lebanon. And she tried to commit suicide. She was so distraught by what was happening. She was very vulnerable. She actually thought she was trying to help her mother because she
Hmm.
thought if there was one less mouth to feed, it might help. She was in a really terrible state when I met her. She's probably about 10 years old. We, because of the money that we raised because of Aya's story, one of the people that we're also helping is Huala. And just yesterday, it was her 17th birthday. And she sent me a lovely message. She talked about how well she's doing in school, how positive she is, everything that's going on in her life. And again, it's because of Aya's story. It's because of Gish, because of random acts that people all around the world really having the opportunity to live their life to its full potential. And that's something that I'm hugely grateful to be part of. And I look forward to being part of that again in the future.
Yeah, me too. It's so gratifying to hear those stories and to see these folks that we have partnered with being so in such a good place.
And you know,
Is she still going to planning to go to med school?
yes, yes. While I'm still planning to go to med
That's
school,
amazing.
Khulud, the woman who's paralyzed, she's living in Holland. And you know what's really funny or lovely at the moment is each morning I wake up and I got WhatsApp messages from Aya's family, from Khulud, from Olive, the woman in Rwanda, all checking in on me, going, "How are you doing in this difficult time?" And
Ah,
that's the beautiful thing of community. And you know, we were able to help them, and now they're in a position where they want to be able to help us and check in on us.
oh, that's lovely. Um, all right, Giles. Thanks for talking.
No, it's been an absolute
Really
pleasure.
nice to
As
see you.
always.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you. Speak soon.
let's do it again. Okay,
Okay. Bye.
bye.